All systems go. Clear for liftoff. What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition of Leverage Lane here on the Ship It Nation YouTube station. Got my guy Alex Blickle here with me as always. Going to get to the Travelers Championship, but we are coming off of a major week. We're coming off of some major news in the golf world, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We've got a pretty good topic for today, one that I know a lot of people struggle with, so we'll go through that in the evergreen section. Then we'll get to, as usual, breaking down the chalk build for the week, how we can leverage the chalk build, the betting breakdown, the one and done segment, and then of course our leverage lane at the end, letting you know how we're going from a single entry perspective this week. Big week ahead over on DraftKings. It is the Fantasy Golf World Championship round 1. So 200 contestants will play down. The top 100 will move on into round 2 next week. It's I think minimum prize right now for the 200 is $7,000 per person. Already, I myself have a couple. I've seen some in the chat that have some, and I know it's a big week ahead for many with those seats. So good luck to everybody from that perspective. Alex, I'm going to bring you in, man. Before I do, just want to say, first off, shout out to our guy WT Reed last week, who was giving away the $100 Ship It Nation membership. The winner of that had your guy. You liked Ryan Fox quite a bit last week. It was Michael Hambly 6863 was the winner. Said Ryan Fox, the best play in the 6,000s, Windy Links type golfer. Really good week for Ryan Fox, and best of the 6Ks out of those comments there. So shout out to Michael Hambly 6863. But what's going on, my friend? Happy to be back with you. And what do you think of the US Open?
I really enjoyed the US Open. I did think there were a couple things that could have made it even better. Like the biggest one is I wish we had gotten to see a firm golf course all 4 days instead of just the last day. I know it would have made scoring more difficult, but I made this point with Pat. I was like, players expect conditions to be extremely difficult when the wind is up as much as it was on Thursday and Saturday. And it was like the USGA tried to make it such that scoring conditions were like equally difficult for all 4 days instead of letting it play super hard when the weather dictated that. And so they kept things really soft early. I think they needed to keep the greens slow early in the week with all that wind. They didn't need to keep the greens as soft as they were. And actually, like, they were on Thursday morning, I think you could even make an argument that they were so soft that it was hurting players. And it was even tougher because of how soft it was, because they couldn't control the spin into the wind. And like every into the wind shot was just ripping back off the front of the green, off those big false fronts, like on 10. And they were just helpless that way. So I didn't love that aspect of it, but from the scores, like you can tell, it still played like a phenomenal test. I was watching with my dad on Sunday, and like he kept making the point that, you know, he's played Pinehurst a ton, and he kept saying like, these greens remind me of Pinehurst, but they're even tougher because at Pinehurst you have a lot of those instances where like one side of the green is just a total runoff far away from the green. You don't have instances at Pinehurst like number 10 at Shinnecock, where that's the case both at the front of the green, it's going to come down off the front to like 50 yards away, and the back of the green, it's going to go way back behind, and you just don't have like that severe of a two-sided penalty. And you could tell that the players were really struggling with that all week. You saw it on 11 as well. It was just a really, really unique test for these players. And that's the ultimate excitement for me is watching these guys deal with something that they don't deal with on a typical basis.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be a popular opinion. It could be the opposite of what people think, but I thought it was fine. Like, to me, the setup of it was, you know, it's what we always get at US Open. We saw this a few years back when it was like Xander and Ricky shot a 6 under on day one. I think I might even have been LACC, which ended up being like a comp with Wyndham, but it was like the same type of thing. And then by Saturday, the balls were bouncing off the greens, and it was like, okay, we're back. USGA got us covered here. And so it's always something. There'd be nothing to complain about if it wasn't that. But I would say, like, overall, I mean, don't fully disagree. I just think it's like, we did get a good week. Like I know people always say too, and I do, and I know you do, and I do. We love seeing the carnage. We hate just seeing birdie fests all the time. And we'll get to that in a second with some of the news coming up this season for the PGA or in the future, I should say. Maybe not this season. It might even be 2028, but just noting it, it's like this type of event where, everyone says that, but I never see people going on X or Twitter, whatever you call it, being like, man, I really love watching every single day of people just getting crushed. You like to see it some, you want to see bad shots get punished, all of that, but it's kind of like it's a sculpture. It's an artwork. It's a piece of like, okay, how does the whole thing play out? And again, we know, golf degens, especially in the DFS streets that we're focused on, it's like they can't have patience even past the first hole, but it's like overall phenomenal event. And then the other side of it is the Windy Sea stuff. Like, man, forget just like the Sunday. We'll go to that in a minute. We'll talk about the other golf stuff first, but I will just say quickly, it's like, oh, how lucky he got this way, or how much he pulled off this. He pulled it for 4 days. He and beats the world number one on the last day and doesn't like. It's like when people say a Millie Maker lineup is bad, and we've definitely judged it before and been like, well, that's pretty interesting. But if he's that bad, how is he winning a second one? How is he just winning weeks back too? It's like he's not that bad. It's just you gotta give the guys flowers at some point here. That was incredible for 4 days.
Yeah, and I think the narrative that he got really, really lucky throughout the week, there are certainly times when he did get lucky, but I also think that it needs to be said, you could tell from the conversations that he was having with his caddy, Big Wave Dave, that they had it mapped out, like the entire golf course. They had the fescue mapped out for what parts were really penal and which parts were kind of, down grain and thinned out. You could hear it on his layup on 17 when he was in that really bad lie on Sunday, and he asked like point blank, like, what's the fescue like through to the right? And his caddy immediately says, like, it's really thick and penal until you get past the bunker, and then it really thins out. Like, they had every aspect of the fescue mapped out. And so, I talk a lot about like our stroke ski and driving accuracy and how misses on one, not all misses are created equal, and there's a good miss and a bad miss on every hole. Wyndham obviously missed a lot of fairways into fescue, but you know what? I can pretty much guarantee you that on every single hole where he was in fescue, now obviously like a lot of those were also bad swings, but he probably had a sense of, if I miss on this hole, I can miss right and be fine. I can't miss left. And the next hole, it's I can't miss left, or I can miss left. I can't miss right. And he kept missing in the right spots, in the thinned out spots. And so it wasn't just luck. Obviously, like, there is some luck, right? Like, even if you're missing in the correct spot of the fescue, you can still end up in a really bad lie. And similarly, you can hit it into the wrong spot and end up with a good lie. But for the most part, I think they did a really good job of just understanding which parts of the fescue were playable. And that's also just like an understanding of his own game, that like he's probably not going to go 72 holes without some errant tee shots. He went into the week saying like he really likes this golf course because he likes wide fairways. He knows that that's part of the, part of what holds him back at times is that driving accuracy. And so they had a game plan specifically for that. And I think they executed it really well.
Nailed it. And to relate it back to DFS, this is the evergreen session of the show anyway, to, the segment, I should say. So just to note it, I talk about this a ton in DFS Mastermind. It's like it's a mindset thing, but it's also, important, especially when you play an individual game like golf or DFS and try and relate it back from that. But preparation, this is for all life, by the way, preparation greater than planning. Everyone plans to play DFS this week. How many people are actually prepping? Those here watching this, you're doing some prep work. You're finding out, what does the common build look like? What is the chalk build? How can we leverage that? You're preparing for if this, then that, because we know the outcomes of the picks and plays are going to be the outcome, but the process is what gets us to there, and those just become the product of the process. Now, going back to preparation greater than planning, I always said this like a petty theft in NBA. One of the best, maybe the best to ever do it, I think, in NBA DFS specifically. He had talked at one point publicly about having multiple CSVs ready to roll at lock. So he wasn't just planning to play DFS that night like everybody else was, even some of the better players. He was prepped for, if this injury, then this CSV. If this piece of news, this. And so he could react faster than most, on top of the other factors and how good he was, and thoughts about how he plays and knowing rotations and building his own projections and all these factors. So that preparation is so high. Wyndham knows, and look, all kinds of pros do this. I'm sure a ton of other golfers were just as prepared. Maybe they just didn't execute as much. And we'll be talking about execution when we talk about the new golf world that we're going to get into. But just noting it, he was very clearly, I loved your post about that. You posted on X the other day, and you said like, there's got to be something said about this, knowing that like, hey, my plan is to be in the fairway. They're wide, but I know that that's not how my game might be at some point, or I know my shots might go awry and I'm going to have to think about what's next. So my preparation is knowing if I'm playing from here, what's that look like? If I'm playing from here, what's that look like? And everyone does as much prep as possible. You heard it, our guy Gannon goes to the event, boots on the ground. He said, these guys are walking around with wedges and putters, and that's it, man. They're trying to do that. They're all preparing for something, but for someone to know their game that well, to say like, we're going to need to know the gauge of the fescue and all that. It does matter. It's those little things that can add up and compound to eventually pay off. And it's no different in DFS. So I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that. If not, we'll hop in and start talking about the changes yesterday and just what your thoughts were on it.
Yeah, I really like these changes. I think to be very picky to start, like I do wish that there was going to be more in-season turnover between the challenger track and the championship track. And I think part of that is like, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, I think you should, do you want to frame it up first? Because obviously probably not everybody saw it. I know like we assume everyone sees it. That's my bad. But like, yeah, maybe just frame up first quickly your 3-second thoughts on that, 30-second thoughts on that. And then you can dive into exactly where you were going with it. That would be best.
Yeah, it's a good idea. So, but essentially what they're doing is they're creating like a championship track and a challenger track. Now, it's not entirely clear how this is like super different from the PGA Tour and the Corn Ferry Tour, other than the fact that it's going to be like so currently, you have very different PGA Tour events from one week to the next with the signature events. And you get a total mix of the field where sometimes you get like, all of the stars and then a good amount of non-stars like you get in a major championship field. We're not going to see that sort of thing on this new championship track. It's going to be like the same 120, might be like 130 guys, whatever. I can't remember the exact full field size.
It was 120, but the key was now we're going to see a cut.
Yes. So we're getting the full field. We're getting the cut. And we're also getting a more spread out schedule a little bit in the sense that like, I think the current plan is they want a week off after every single major championship. So we're not going straight from major championship to signature event like the RBC Heritage anymore, which I think is a really good thing. We always kind of look at that as like, this is a weird week where it feels less intense, but also it's supposed to be a really important tournament. So that's nice. The secondary track will have overlap most weeks, but it's the challenger track is going to have 7 weeks where it doesn't compete with the PGA Tour, with the championship track. And those are going to be like heavier weighted and a bigger purse or something like that. And so that aspect of it is nice. Some of the other things I really like is we don't know exactly what the format for the playoffs is going to be anymore, but it's going to include match play. So we do get that aspect of it. I really like that. The fall swing is going to include some joint PGA Tour and DP World Tour kind of collaboration events so that the championship track players have somewhere to play throughout the fall if they would like. And then the fall swing of the PGA Tour specifically is going to be like a last chance to kind of qualify for the Challenger Tour the following year. Challenger Tour players can move up within the season, but they have to win twice. So it's not like we're getting, the Aon Next 10 or the Swing 5, whatever that we currently have, so that we do get some variation in the fields. And I think that's my biggest complaint is I think it's going to feel a lot like the signature events have especially from a DFS perspective, where it feels a little bit like we're just trying to solve the same puzzle week after week. And there's not enough kind of variation to keep it super fascinating in that regard. My hope, though, is because there's now just a championship track and these guys have their status for the full year, they don't have to worry about being relegated in season. Maybe it means that players, especially the guys at the top who, aren't at risk of losing that status for the next year, maybe they do take more weeks off. And so at least the top of the board, kind of like this week, will look more kind of diverse from one week to the next. I think that would be really nice, but that's kind of unique to us as DFS players, where like, the average PGA Tour fan might want to see all of the players, the same players week after week, because those are the players that they know and want to root for.
I had to look back. It was August 2024 when I posted the big thing about match play needs to come back to this. So I'm happy that there's going to be some form of it. I went a little bit more aggressive. Like if they could somehow like pick their, like I would love, I think like just injecting personality into it, which we'll talk about quickly with Wyndham here in a second again, but just the personality of it. Maybe I'll segue these two because now they go perfectly together. So we're just tying it all together now. But my point was, everyone always says like, oh, but the 1 seed could lose to this. First of all, there would be buys or some sort of seeding set up that way. Usually, if there's not, so be it. Or maybe it's like the final 32, and then most of them get taken care of with money in advance. Again, we don't know how this is going to work, but at least my take is yes, a 1 seed can lose to a 16 seed or whatever number you want to put on it in any type of tournament. So my point being, it can happen. That's the name of the game. That's the whole point. And you're the number one for a reason. You got to go out and hold your own and get the job done. Oh, but it's golf. It's such high variance. Then everything's high variance. Then it's all high. Like, so could the tournament be? Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy last week at the U.S. Open, destroyed versus the guys around him and the guys above him. Like literally, amateurs doing good last week versus the other. Like anything can happen. You're right. It's golf, and that's the whole point. But there's so much more drama to that. You get the storyline. What I wanted to see happen, I know they won't go this far because it's like a gentleman's game, which is what we're going to get to with the Wyndham stuff in a minute anyway. So that's why I said I'd segue it. But the idea of like setting this up where one could pick, then it's like, yeah, there's variance, but you also chose that person. And I know that can spark the other person. We know the stories from back in the day in college with like Brian Harmon, who will be a popular topic this week. It was Brian Harmon versus Ricky Fowler. I believe Ricky was the favorite. Everyone loved Ricky even back then. Ricky like walked off on 15 and was like, go put your own pin back, pal. And then Brian Harmon was like, oh, really? Okay, then pin back, destroys him on the end and takes him out. And it was like, that was like motivation for him. But that's what we want. That's the drama in match play. You want some firing back and forth. So that was my thought. I know they won't go that route, but I'm still fine with it. I think it makes it exciting. I think it gets some really good setups. And if you do it right, and you can have more matchups on the course. I know people talk about TV. Well, that's the PGA's issue in its own right anyway. And why I said I wanted to sort of talk together on all of this. One, I said right away, if they're running these events congruently, like we can't even get shots on the main event that we want to see. Now they're going to be watching two different networks, two different things. I don't know how they're going to do it to play both events. I'm guessing we just maybe won't see as much of the other one. Who knows? But there's some real names on that other tour. Somebody posted a list of it yesterday. I think it was PGA tout. John, shout out to him. And I think it was like, Will Zalatoris. And I'm trying to think of a bunch of others, but there was enough good names on there that it's like, okay, I would have interest in still tuning into that. And I think one thing people get wrong on this type of stuff is like, oh, because it's the PGA Tour, they're immune to, marketing and execution. First of all, they're losing sponsors hand over fist. I think the FedEx Cup thing is almost done anyway, so that's fine. They're just going to probably get a new one if they don't renew it. But like we've seen Honda and big names leave, and that's fine. But I think people forget like announcing stuff and launching stuff is way easier than actual execution. That's the key, right? Talking about stuff and talk and walk, very different. And if you don't remember or recall, go look up Fire Festival. Looked phenomenal on paper. Looked like one of the best experiences you would ever go to. And you get there and it's like tents and PB&J sandwiches. So talking about something and launching something and actually executing on it are two different things. It's not like PGA Tour has been incredible on an execution level, but they are a higher class, top of the line, organization. So you would expect this to be good. All we can do is be positive about what we've seen so far.
And to that point, like one of the other things that they're talking about is they want the playoffs to be kind of a rotation of really well-respected golf courses that people will recognize, but that aren't consistently played on tour. And so like East Lake might have its own event, or it might be part of a rotation instead of always being the site of the culmination of the playoffs. But Rollup also said that means he wants Cypress to be one of the events. He wants Seminole and Pine Valley. And like that's the part of it to me, which is like a bit reminiscent of the Fire Festival. As you said, like, are you actually going to be able to pull that off? Or are you just kind of blowing smoke and hoping that by saying this publicly that one of those courses will be like, well, yeah, sure, I guess we can do that. As I have no idea if that's like actually something that's been brought up. But the part that I do expect to happen that they talked about is also a rotation, kind of adding some courses from big markets like New York, like we'll talk about that a little bit more soon. But Philly, good chance, Chicago thing, big cities like that you're going to get really good turnout, really good kind of fan participation from. And then also just like there are some awesome golf courses in those areas that aren't part of the PGA Tour right now. Far better golf courses than some of the courses that you go to. Like obviously, early in the season, think about like, I'll use my dad as an example again, because I think we've talked about this before. Like he's the perfect kind of, just casual golf fan. He likes tuning in at times, but it's never appointment viewing for him. But one of the things that will make him tune in will make the extra effort where it's not just like, okay, I'm on the couch right now and I know golf's on, I might as well put it on, but like actually, make a point to, that's something I want to go and watch later, is the golf course itself. He wants to tune into Pebble Beach. He wants to tune in to Riviera and to Bay Hill and golf courses like that. He's not tuning into Detroit Golf Club or TBC Twin Cities or TBC River Highlands like this week. But you know what he will tune into? Cricket Club, Pine Valley, things of that nature. So I think that too is a really smart thing that Roll-Up's doing, and hopefully they can execute and put some really good golf courses on the schedule that we currently don't see.
100% agree. And I know, like you said, tying that to what you originally said off the top, that was also the point of where if we don't, like, for example, Canada gets one event. It's the Open, and that's fair. And I get why that is and all of that. But my point being, now it may be in a much better position in the new world based off of that, and see, if it is actually a champion event, which is also super confusing when they have the Champions Tour and all this, by the way, but just noting it, maybe these are just placeholders. But anyway, when we see that, that's going to be like a loaded event now. So it's like, you do got to get to Ontario most likely, where they're going to have it somewhere in, Toronto or different places there, but you're going to get to see everybody, or anybody who's everybody that is showing up. Not every week is going to be every top golfer, but you'll see how, like this year, we're like, oh man, that's much better than we usually get. But this will be like a more appointment type viewing or that type of thing. Now, the easy way to spread these courses out, and then the segue to the final topic here, is just take all the events out of New York, right? That was the point. I know you touched earlier on a pre-show. I think it was on a post from, maybe it was Eamon Lynch or somebody that posted out there, but I'll let you dive into it first. I've got some thoughts. It may not be popular either, but let me hear your thoughts first on everything. And the fan, we're talking about the crowd, the fans at the US Open, ripping into Wyndham Clark and all that type of stuff. Like literally every hole was like, go in the bunker and all these different thoughts. By the way, the Rory big boy rebuttal was pretty good there. I like that one quite a bit.
That was awesome. Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, that just to real quick, we'll start with that Rory one. Someone was chirping at Rory after a shot, so he walks off the tee box and kind of looks back to like find like who's the guy who said that, sees the guy and just goes like this, showing just that the guy had a huge gut. It was just a just awesome way to just kind of silently retort. So love that from Rory. And I think that kind of runs to your point about the like injecting some more personality into the 100%. Playoffs. I love the idea of making them pick who they're playing. You get some, kind of good-natured, heated rivalry type stuff that I think would be really fun to add. But yeah, so this is now the second time in the last like 10 months where the crowd very clearly crossed the line on Long Island. The first was at the Ryder Cup at Bethpage, and now this with Wyndham. Now, I do think it is worth saying that there's a big difference between what happened at Bethpage, where like the crowd was crossing a lot of lines in a very significant way. There were players and spectators who reported they didn't feel safe around that crowd. I don't think anything like that happened this past week at the US Open, but it was very clearly like, this is not the spirit of golf. And this is, and I don't even mean that in like a, let's protect the old way of the game, but like there's an element of pride with golf that is not, I don't think, just stale old man yell at clouds type thing where you root for things to happen. You don't root against things. And rooting for a player, like if you don't like Wyndham and you want Scotty to win, root like hell for Scotty to win. Don't openly root against Wyndham. And I think that it's not anywhere near as big of a deal as what happened at Bethpage, but it is like, I think it is still crossing the line in some way. And it would, to Eamon Lynch's point, like I think he said it on a Golf Channel, something like that, but like Bethpage Black is supposed to host the PGA Championship in 2033. And his point was that these Long Islanders don't deserve another major championship and that should be moved. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think, maybe you say like, hey, we need the crowd to be better in 2033, or then we are kind of taking things away from you guys for a while. But I think it's also like a bit of an extension of how welcoming the PGA Tour has been of the WM Phoenix Open. And like, it's a tough balance because you want to invite like all these new people into golf fandom, but you also don't want to ruin what is a really good kind of culture around the sport. And that's why, you have people like Jeff Feinberg saying shrink the game at this point, which I do kind of agree with, at least when it comes to who's playing, not necessarily who's watching the game.
Yeah, I got a lot of thoughts, I guess, like, and hard to tell. I think we agree on a lot and most, and I think we still kind of do here. Like, I think that this is the type of thing that gets boiled down and backward. Like, okay, true. He says, disclaimer, Long Island does not speak for the rest of New York. Embarrassing stuff. Probably agree. Also would say, though, that Long Island is going to step up and say, buddy, there was like 2% of the fans there that were doing this. The other 98% were not bad people. Like, what are you putting a stain on our name? And again, it does get labeled because of where you are and all that. And I get that. So there's that aspect to it. I sort of like the point you said about like, let's root really hard for someone, not against someone. But I guess like, where is the line drawn? So I got a real problem with events where people are coming at these people's families and their wives and their kids and stuff like that. You literally cannot do that. There's just no way in any sport or anything in life is that right in my mind or my sort of concept and how I live that I would think that's correct. So it's like, that is not what we're hoping for here. But I think there's another fine line of something you said that maybe I would disagree with. It's like, so WM, that is, to me, and I've been to it like 6 times. I talk about it all the time. I've ran to it. I've been on 16. I've been in the booths on the skybox. I've finally got someone to let me in there. Like things like that, where it's like, that is, to me, not even full golf fandom. That is event fandom. Mm-hmm. So many people there don't care about the game of golf at all. They're there. And again, there's bad eggs in that group as well. They get drunk and stumble and ruin it and whatever. But I mean, even in the general scope of the 98 to 2% of those people, they're there because it's a big event. That's what Rolap is going to do if he brings this to all these other states that don't get events all the time. Yes, more people will show up. You could get more fans out of that. And so that's where that steps in and makes sense. But from like any other sport, one thing I don't love, and I think I actually disagree, I think Feinberg posted it and I would disagree, is like the gentleman's game stuff. It is, I get it. But like, and even you said, I'm not going to the old ways here. I'm just noting in general. So I agree with your generalities, but like, there has to be able to be something. If you want real fans of a game, how can they not boo or do it? Like, there has to be something. It doesn't have to be booing because that's kind of weird on a golf course. But I guess my point is there has to be some version of being able to have a true fan side. Like, I'm here for Scotty. I'm here for Rory or whatever. Respectfully. You cannot do it disrespectfully, but there has to be something. Like someone said it. I don't know who else said this one. I would just see so many things as the week goes on. Like, imagine going to the game and NBA players that are shooting free throws are just silent Jim, or like, they get exactly what they want on everything. The golfers already get that. You do have to shut up when they're shooting, or you should be. Like, yes, that's a legit gentleman's game type thing. Be quiet before someone swings. Agreed. But how can there not be the other side of it? Like in the other sports, they got to deal with so much more. And I'm not saying they have to be completely like the other sports, but I actually don't think there was anything wrong with it. And I'll say this, it doesn't seem like anyone crossed the line to the extent, to your point, and you said this as well, to like what the Ryder Cup stuff was with families and Rory's wife, and somebody threw the beer on Rory's wife or threw it at her or something. Like, that's insane. I'm talking about here, and I'll say this too. I think Wyndham handled it incredibly well at the end. I'm not some Wyndham stan. I don't even like the guy or care that much. I think it's, he's been fine. But it was like, I'm not against, I don't pay attention too much to care, like, oh, but the locker incident, oh, but the club throw. These golfers that show emotion, it's people talk about both sides. They want to see Tyrrell Hatton and laugh at him, like pointing a pistol or like a shotgun and making remarks and hitting the ball or hitting himself or whatever. But then they don't want to see all this other stuff. To me, I was fine with it. And I think the way Wyndham handled it said, I know you guys hate me, but I love you. But here I am, and here's what it is, and I've got the trophy. Like, that's cool, and it's just another added story to the event. I guarantee you there was people that talk shit that still afterwards were like, damn, dude battled through all of that, plus took down Scotty in a group and won the trophy. Kudos to him type thing. Like, you got to think that happened. So I don't know. Maybe it's that was my 2 cents.
To your point, like, I definitely wonder how my own thoughts might even be different about what happened this week, if not for the Ryder Cup, where like we already were kind of on edge, or just kind of looking out for what the fan behavior was like because of Bethpage Black, where maybe if this was a one-off and this was like the only thing that the only instance of late where the Long Island fans kind of really went at a guy or potentially crossed the line in terms of what is allowed when you're watching golf, where I probably would be in total agreement with you in saying I have no issue with it. Like, to your point, it didn't seem like anyone was yelling in swings. Now, I also do think that like what we heard on the broadcast, there were probably worse things being said and worse timed things than what we could very clearly hear. So I do think it's important to keep that in mind. And I think Scotty, or maybe it was Ted Scott, actually, Scotty's caddy, who made reference to that like, yeah, it was worse than just, people yelling after he made contact or kind of, cheering when he missed a putt or things of that nature. So I think there was a little bit more than just that. If it was just that, if it was just, get in the bunker after he makes contact or cheering when he missed a putt, then I agree that that's not crossing any lines, even if it doesn't sit right with some golf fans.
Yeah, all good there. I think that puts a knot on it, like ties it up for what we were talking about, because what you just said there is the key. Obviously, there was other stuff said that we don't know, but also there is people that got kicked out. So that was another factor as well. But like, I don't even like when, Rory's getting people kicked out for saying, get in the bunker. Like, I like it actually. And it was just a couple of weeks ago, by the way, wasn't it? Ryan Gerard was like, it's not in the bunker, dog. And the guy that's amazing. Yeah. We need that. That is not even smack talk. That is so minimum. And that's the thing when I talked about it, like the biggest story in golf is like Scotty Scheffler said, golly gee, Todd, we can't, or Ted, we can't get the wind wrong. Okay. Like, that is not a storyline. That's ridiculous. Yeah. That's what makes it horrible. Sometimes it's like, oh, but I just want to watch the majestic good shots and the way the course flows and all that. Like, man, get some emotion. Like Jordan said in the chat, we got to get some of that emotion into it. Rory's definitely been a softie at times. Like, same thing backwards. Rory can't go take a golf. He can do whatever he wants. So like walking up to a fan, taking their phone and snapping it or throwing it on the ground and smashing it or something. Yeah, I don't know if that's it should go both ways. You can't do that either. But yeah, I think it's like just being respectful, being able to say like, get in the bunker after the shot, to me is totally fine. Because hey, like, don't say that. You're rude to a golfer. Like, these are golfers, man. They're out playing in front of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands in some cases, at like the Waste Management, like you said. So I don't know. I think it's just, there's got to be more of something. It's hard to go, pinpoint what it is. But I like having the villains. I like having the ones that we all cheer for. And I like having that, the Americans versus the Euros for the Ryder Cup. It builds towards the hype when we do get to the Ryder Cup. We just can't have the disrespect. You can't have the personal, disrespectful, outside of the obvious stuff like talking in backswings, things that you can't have that type of stuff. So for sure.
Yeah, I want to say one more thing here, and then we can get into obviously the Travelers and what I think is a really kind of fun topic to discuss and what should be a really kind of helpful one, because I think this is a topic where like it's not just about helping others, but I think you and I are going to really benefit from having the conversation ourselves. So last thing I want to say is I really do agree with you that like it would be great to have that extra intensity and personality shown. But I will say like there's a very big difference between golfers and other athletes in this regard. Because like as someone who played soccer, basketball, baseball growing up, obviously I've played golf at a decent level, and I played golf and basketball for my college. So I know what all the different sports are like. When you're in any sport other than golf and you're in the heat of the moment, you want to lean into the emotion of the situation and the adrenaline and kind of let that feed you. In golf, it's kind of a constant battle to stay as calm as you can possibly be amidst everything and like the tension around you. And so when people say like, oh, why can't golfers deal with this when other athletes do? Like, they're in a very different challenge where, someone on the, like, look at Jalen Brunson on the road or Trae Young in Madison Square Garden. Like, they are feeding off that negative energy in a really cool way, in a way that we as fans love to watch and see. And so, yeah, we like as fans of golf, we would also love to see that. And in the Ryder Cup, we do get to see that, right? We saw Patrick Reed play the villain role in just a phenomenal way. We saw Rory do that multiple times now on U.S. soil. That's really fun. But in a typical PGA Tour event or even a major championship, like those guys are on their own. They don't have teammates to kind of feed into that energy with. They're on their own, and they're fighting a constant battle to stay as calm as they can possibly be. And so it's just it makes sense for them to kind of push back against that type of fan interaction in a way that kind of other athletes in other sports don't.
Yeah, that's what they would like. But also you
Yeah.
do create, you make your own bed. I mean, we've been taught this since we were kids. Like you make your bed, you lie in it. I think that's why I thought Wyndham's response was fair. He's like, look, I know you guys hate me. I love you. I'm trying to win these fans back. But at the end of the day, you did some shit, Wyndham, in the past that people aren't very happy with, that make them dislike you. So you brought that on. Well, you would like to stay calm. Again, can't have the disrespect. Can't have it during the swing, can't have it that, but you do create your own kingdom of sort of what you live within. And it's obviously that's where the back and forth battle is, but I think it's a good topic. One topic we wanted to talk about today quick is one that comes up a lot. And I know you brought it up and I'm going to let you go through it, but people love playing their guys, right? And I was saying this about Wyndham even, like imagine someone who played Wyndham forever and then this last month and a half sort of jumped off the wagon, the Wyndham wagon, if you will, and stopped playing him. And now like, geez, this guy's back and he's winning all the time. He's won twice. He's done well, et cetera, et cetera. So do you have a thought process around that and just sort of break the topic down from your perspective? And then we'll go into that and take it right into Travelers from there.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. Like one of the reasons why I think this is a really good discussion is because it applies not just to PGA DFS, but every single DFS sport. And essentially the question is like, how do you know when to give up on your guys? How do you know when to stop playing the guys you really like playing? And what does that decision look like? And the reason why I wanted to talk about it today is because I feel like over the last couple of weeks, like we've had a number of instances where we've had like extreme outcomes in both directions. And so you already made the point with Wyndham, like he's maybe the ultimate example of, I've been on him since the start of this year. He was one of my highest owned guys in best ball. I played him at TBC Craig Ranch. And so, I got the full kind of benefit of being patient with him and continuing to go to him and lean into his scoring and the upside. And eventually it paid off. But then there are also other players where that's not the case. Going to Hideki Matsuyama over and over of late has not worked out. And now we have a $7,300 Hideki who doesn't look like he's going to be popular. So we're faced with this kind of decision again this week. And, last week, like two of my guys who I love playing and did not play, Keith Mitchell, Sahith Theegala, ended up two of the best values in a range where like that could have unlocked anything that you wanted to do at the top. And so we've just had like these really kind of extreme outcomes where another example, like going back to Spieth hurt me. I've gone to him a bunch. And so it's basically like a question for both of us that I think we can answer and people can chime in the chat as well. But like, how do you know when to give up on a guy? Cause I think this is probably the best way to phrase it. Like you've been playing him for a reason. As long as those reasons haven't changed, you probably should keep playing him. Like the logical thing to do, the smartest thing to do is probably to be really stubborn and continue playing him unless projections suddenly change. Like he's been so bad that now he's gone from someone who projects well to someone who projects poorly. Obviously that changes things. But if he's still projecting well and you still like him for all the same reasons, the logical thing to do is to keep playing the guy, even though that can feel really wrong. And I think you and I are also in unique positions as content creators and as analysts where like, I don't want people to think that I'm an idiot. And if I tell them to play Hideki again this week and he sucks again, people are going to think that I'm an idiot and I'm just too stubborn to let go of this, love for Hideki Matsuyama and I need to get over it. And so there's this added element of, do I continue to stay true to to wanting to provide the best analysis that I can, or do I kind of protect my perception a little bit? And it's not the easiest thing to balance. So very kind of interested to hear your thoughts on this whole conversation, because I would love to have a better framework so that it doesn't feel like I'm making just one-off decisions about each guy where I know that I'm going to make mistakes with that framework. And I'd like to have a better way to approach this, to like have things that I can look to and point to say, yes, this makes this guy the type that I want to go back to, versus this is the type of guy that I should let go and wait to see some positive results before I go back to him again.
Yeah, shout out to my guy Hoop. We've talked about this a ton in the past in all DFS sports about like playing your guys, and he always says like if you've been playing them, stick with them, and if if you're sort of never been playing them, you just got to ride that wave of the opposite side because then you at least have something that you feel more comfortable with. To your side, obviously, so much on the data and the analytics and the back end, like you also have a better way of seeing that to say, hey, I'm going to stick with Hideki because I've been on Hideki for this reason. And I haven't actually seen this happen. What I've seen happen, I mean, I think it was even last week when you brought up Hideki, you're like, the other courses that he has played haven't really suited as much as what I would expect to see here. And then you get a tough US Open where it didn't necessarily fully play out or whatever, like all these factors, I get that. But I would not move off just because of that. And I also would say, to your point from the content creator side, one, we get a ton of stuff wrong, but that we also don't focus, you and I, a ton on picks and plays. So it's like there's part of that is the process piece. That's why this discussion matters more than the actual player of Hideki. We're just using him as the example piece. But the second one of it would be for just as bad as you could look for people saying, first of all, nobody cares. Forget just the work harder part, but nobody actually cares. It's like it's just part of those things that'll fly by. But just noting it, for the part that you could get him wrong again, and they're like, oh, what an idiot. He keeps playing this Hideki guy. He's not sharp. He doesn't know whatever. You would be making a case. You'd be writing a full blurb. You'd have reasoning that people would resonate and agree with going in, and then the result just doesn't play out. But I'll tell you what, it can be just as bad on the other side. You finally jump off him, and then he wins, and you weren't wrong. You were just early, right? You hear that saying, like never wrong.
Never wrong, just early. Yep.
That's almost worse to me. It's like, how the hell did you jump off your guy? You really had no good reason to jump off him, and you just did. And now you almost, because people take your word on this guy and feel like it's one of your guys or your dudes, they're like, damn, you told me it was a bad week to move off him. And so I went with you. I trusted him. He's your guy. And it's like, you didn't play your guy. So I think that's important. Hopefully that makes sense to people, but I do think that's important on why you should be, again, if you have a process, it's always better for you. I think it's very data driven, analytical to say, I'm not moving off Decky. It's not just because he's 7,300 and that's an insane price for Decky here, but I'm excited. He's still my guy. He still checks out for me. I actually went back and looked. I'm just ad-libbing now, and I went back and looked at his US Open stuff. Here's how it actually shook out, and I feel comfortable going back to him here. And I like that this is a much less. I know it's a signature event, but it's a not as strong of a field or a hard of a course as what we saw last week. I think there is an opportunity for him to break through here, and even bonus cherry on top. Nobody wants him this week, or very little do. So I actually feel better about still going back there. And here's what I do see with him for this course, for this week, for this event, et cetera, et cetera. So just ad-libbed a bunch of it, but just to note, that's how I would think about that. And you would be validating it, not just saying, got to keep playing my guy. Like right. you wouldn't be saying that.
Yeah, I really like the point that you made about fit, where, and this part of it, like it probably is a little bit PGA specific, although it does translate to NFL as well, right? Like if you were playing a wide receiver multiple weeks in a row because you really like him, but then he hasn't paid off, and you realize, well, okay, but wait, he's been much better against man coverage, and he just played 2 zone-heavy teams. Now he plays a man team. This is the time to go back to him. So I think like that does apply to other sports, but specific to Hideki, like this is a really good example. When I brought this up for Hideki was going into the PGA Championship because he had just played very well in Texas and then the Masters, and then struggled in back-to-back weeks at the Cadillac and the Truist, 2 of the most, off the tee predictive courses on tour. Goes to the PGA Championship, does well. He was even better than his T26 finish there. He just ran into a really tough stretch after starting well on Sunday. Then goes to the Schwab, another course that fits him pretty well, finishes 13th. So it's like, okay, that paid off, right? Like the analysis on the fact that he didn't fit the previous golf courses really came true. That made him, and then the Memorial, you have accuracy off the tee being super predictive. He's not very accurate off the tee, doesn't do as well there, and then struggled at the US Open. The US Open, I do think, was a course that did fit him pretty well, and he just didn't play as well. So now the question is, like, given that, there's really only one event of late where he didn't play well when he did fit the golf course, and like everything about why I like him came true. And I also think that like part of it is, if we played him at the PGA Championship and if we played him at the Charles Schwab, yes, we would have liked for better results than T26 and T13 there. But that's one of those cases where like we should also remember that those are actually very good outcomes. In both of those instances, he outperformed his median expectation. So we should view them as positive, even though they weren't quite as good as we would have liked them to be. So I think there's that kind of perception changing things. I think another really good example of this is Corey Connors, where like one of the reasons why I played him at the Memorial and at the RBC Canadian Open. Why? Because he had really good splits in wind and on difficult courses. We knew we were going to have both of those at the US Open, but now I was saying, okay, but the reason why I would use him here at the US Open is because he's really good in wind and on difficult courses. But that reasoning did not help him play any better the previous 2 weeks. So I ended up off of him in my two lineups. He plays really well, or at least pretty well, finished like 25th or something like that. So had kind of, again, like had, both possible outcomes there where there were guys we should have stayed with that we didn't. There were guys that we didn't stay with that we should have. It's a very difficult thing. We're never going to get every instance correct. And I think that is like the last kind of key point that I want to make here is on these guys, we can't possibly be right and wrong all the time, just like we can't be right and wrong with any golfer. And sometimes we can be right. We can make the correct decision, the decision that puts us in the best position to win and have the outcome work against us because the guy still plays well if we faded him or he plays poorly when we played him. We can't control the outcome. All we can do is control the process. But I do think this is one of the instances of DFS where it's the hardest to know whether or not we made the right decision. That's kind of why I wanted to talk it through.
Yeah, I love that, man. I think it's a good call. Corey Connors was an example last week. Akshay Thigala from the clouds up there. Like just betting on talent sometimes is the key as well. And then we do have to factor in with DFS the pricing and that it's not always like, oh, like he'll never win. We're not betting. Like you have to put 6 people in a salary constraint lineup. So it's like when people get that so confused, it's like the 25th was just fine. Was it amazing? Did I see Corey Connors at the top anywhere? Not really. Like my point being, but at $6,500, it could have been even better. It could have been worse. But it was fine. And it worked out. And playing talents like that, Morikawa last week, another one. Justin Rose, another one. Like some of these guys that just, we were betting on what the event was and what type of tournament it was going to be and all that stuff. So I think it's important to remember there was also guys that came in, Bud Cauley last week, who we'll talk about for this week, coming in off a win. Oh, let's keep riding the wave. 56th, like not anywhere to be found. Bobby Mack coming in off a 15th last week, 39th. It's like you see Victor Hovland showed us a sign of life, baby. 3rd the week before, just what we needed to see. Yep, miscut. So, I mean, a lot of different factors and things will play into it. Let's move on to the Travelers, though, and talk about
one last thing. I do want to kind of wrap this into a bow a little bit where because I think we talked a lot about it, but we didn't actually like offer a specific answer. We just talked about why it's a difficult thing to answer. So my best attempt to answer of like, what is the best way to handle this? What is the best way to come to an answer? I think it's figure out how closely the reasoning for using him or how well it still applies. So like with Connors, for example, the reason to use him the previous 2 weeks had been that he does really well in wind and difficult conditions. You can very easily make the argument that, okay, well, that doesn't apply as well anymore because I just watched him do poorly in back-to-back weeks in those conditions. With Hideki, if I liked him because he was coming off of, courses where he didn't really fit, and now he fits again. Well, this is a week where I do think he fits it kind of well. I wish he was more accurate, of course. So that aspect of it makes him a bit of a poor fit, but we can talk more about Hideki later. I think a better example would be like a Justin Rose. One of the best reasons to use Justin Rose week in, week out is because he's extremely volatile. So he always has a better ceiling than what his projection kind of suggests for most players. So if Rose goes out and has a really bad week, that doesn't affect the thesis. The thesis is that he's really volatile and he's going to have really bad weeks, but he's going to make up for that with fantastic weeks. So if he has one bad week, like the next week, it still very much applies to him and you should go back to him. And so I think that's my best way of answering is just how well does your initial reasoning for using him still apply? And if it does, then you just keep using him no matter what the recent results have been like.
Perfect. Do you have thoughts on the weather or course fit for this week? You mentioned a little when you were talking about Hideki on course fit, but the weather to me, I just pulled it up here quickly, not going to bring everything up on the screen this week, but just to note it, like the temps look pretty straight across the board. The wind is like, picks up a little bit, but not anything crazy, like 8 to 10 miles per hour with 15-mile-per-hour gusts, Thursday. And then on Friday, it shows like a little bit more gusts in the morning, but it's like 17 to 9, and it's very quick and it's out of the way and looks pretty solid across the board there. Don't see a ton else. Did you see anything different in the weather or anything you wanted to discuss there?
No, it doesn't seem like a big variable at all this week. And that's kind of the usual that we get at this course. We did have one like super windy round last year. I think the course was a little bit firmer, if I recall correctly. We should have pretty soft conditions. I do think that that's like my biggest takeaway is we're going from a very difficult windy event to what should be a kind of a little bit of a birdie fest this week. And so I will probably care less than I usually do about, extremely recent form and give players a pass if they looked awful last week. Cause you could shoot a really, really, really bad score last week by being just a little bit off your game. Cause if you were just a little bit off your game, you were consistently penalized pretty strongly for that. Whereas now this week, if you're a little bit off your game, you can still put together a -3, -4 round, feel pretty good about it, come back the next day, be sharper and really go really low. So I think that's my biggest takeaway from a course fit perspective. This is actually a bit of an annoying course in the sense that distance, approach, around the green, and putting all have less predictive signal than usual. Driving accuracy has more predictive signal than usual. That does come with a caveat, though. Since this became a signature event in the last 2 years, we have seen approach play and around the green play really spike in their predictive value, especially relative to what it had been in the past year, but also relative to a typical golf course. And so I'm a little bit unsure of how I want to kind of handle that, because on the one hand, like, that's recent. It's different signal because you have totally different fields. So the field composition is different. That's going to change what really becomes predictive. But it's a small sample. It's 70 players in each season. Like, that's the equivalent of 1 year prior to it becoming a signature event. And I wouldn't put too much stock into 1 year. So should I put a ton of stock into 2 years from these smaller fields? I don't totally know. I think the best way to handle it is look for guys who are accurate, look for guys who project well, and who would benefit if approach play and around the green play continue to be more predictive than usual here.
That's going to be interesting when we talk about this, because I'm going to bring it up in a second. We will move to looking at the chalk build for this week. But it's funny, it ties like a lot of that stuff together of what we talked about in the previous topic. So Siwoo was coming in blazing hot to last week. He was the super value play on the board last week. A lot of people wanted Siwoo, and he misses the cut. Last year here, he WD'd. Before that, 31st. Before that, a bunch of missed cuts. Like, where does Siwoo fall in on this chart? Because I'm going to pull this up now so we have it. But Siwoo is $8,900 this week. I don't know exactly, because this, again, we always talk about this is our rough draft. You'll have your ownership over their rough draft. But where do you have Siwoo falling in right now? And then what sort of type of chalk build are you looking at here? Obviously, Scotty in the field, but at 13.8, a little bit of a difference because there's also no 5K range this week.
Yeah, I'll give the field some credit here. I think he's going to be popular, and he deserves to be popular. And this is one of those spots where, like in the past, he might have been really overlooked because of his history, but people now recognize the fact that, like, look, Siwoo's a totally different player now than he was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. So why should I possibly care what he did here in the past when he's a totally different player now? His strength is driving accuracy. He is one of the most accurate players in the world off the tee. Only Scotty rates out more accurate in our estimates off the tee. So very good fit for the golf course. If approach play and around the green play both matter more than they have here in the past, he'll benefit from that. I think he's probably pretty good chalk in that regard. Not a huge ceiling, but he doesn't really need a ceiling at $8,800, and especially because he's chalk, you're not looking for him to be a separator. You're just looking for him to kind of anchor the lineup and preserve any advantage that your separators around him do give you.
Yeah, I'm trying to see too, like some of the other ownership. But so let's say here, I put Brian Harmon in. Somebody, my man Timmy Dubs, shout out to him. He says, "Where does course history fit for you this year?" Brian Harmon obviously has an incredible track record at the Travelers, 8th, 9th, 2nd, 8th, 5th. I mean, he's coming in off a 32nd at the U.S. Open. Before that, he had a miscut in the 22nd place, but very fair price here. You'd think that he's going to get a little bit of love at that price. What's your thoughts on course history and then Brian Harman fitting into this chalk build to start?
Look, I just gave the industry credit on Siwoo. If Brian Harman is chalk this week, I will rescind that credit because he should not be. I know the course history is really good, but he does not project well. He's not a great fit for the course. Part of that too, like we just talked about with Siwoo, why doesn't history matter for a lot of players? Because who they are as players change. Historically, Brian Harman has been a very accurate player off the tee. Lately, he has not been. He's losing about 1/10 of a stroke per round with his driving accuracy right now. His iron play hasn't been good. His around the green play and his putting have been solid, and they're what's kind of keeping him relevant. But like that's not a guy that I want to lean into at ownership at 7,800. It's not so much that he's overpriced at 7,800. I think it's more that there are a lot of guys underpriced in the low sevens, the upper sixes that are better players and are going to be lower owned.
Yeah, I'm trying to see like, and maybe it's not, I don't know. I think people still like Fitz, but if they're going like the route of like you talked about earlier, I guess Spieth could be in the mix. I'll throw Alex Fitz into this for a second just to get a rough idea. But like this is going to be a high scoring week. Like you're going to be able to put up scores out there, take course history down because this is not that. But just going to like the chalk build quick. If they're not going to Scotty, is it Fleetwood or Ludwig that you see people landing on more, or is it X again? You know, something like that. Because I just did the Ludwig version, and it's like Ludwig, Cantlay, Siwoo, Harman, somewhere in the vicinity. I mean, again, Colleen Fitzpatrick can be anything that you want. But and I'm going to bring that question up for Alex in a second too. I just had a similar thought, but just noting this. Let's stay here for a second. What are you seeing that would be maybe different in your eyes here? Or is this close? And then it's just like pick your poison on your 2v2 of Ludwig and Fitzpatrick or something. Is that kind of how you see it? Or Colley's Gerard or whatever that might be?
I'm higher on most of these guys from an ownership perspective. Tommy 14%, Xander 18, Ludwig 19, Cam Young 15. So I think it's going to be like a pretty concentrated range. But the biggest difference that I have is I've got Sam Burns really separating as the chalkiest of this kind of group at 21% in single entry. So again, I think like the big takeaway here is that there's just going to be as we have seen kind of all season, there's just going to be a decent concentration around all these guys. And it's going to be hard to find anyone here that you can really consider a separator. I think Fitzpatrick and Wyndham might be the most likely to really slip through the cracks.
Yeah, and I think there's multiple versions of this too. Let's say this version, I'm just making this. I mean, it could be Wrighton over Hideki, but just like you said, if it ends up being 2 9s and 8, and Cantlay in this version is not in it, doesn't mean Cantlay won't be popular. He will be. He's got a good course history here as well, and people see that. But just noting it, what I'm constantly seeing is 3 7K guys. Right? Is what you're seeing. It is 3 7K guys versus last week. We didn't have a very big 7K range. We actually don't have a huge 7K range this week. It's just bigger than last, but that's where most people are comfortable going rather than the Straka, Smalleys, Connors, Fowlers of the world down low. They'll get some, but they should be sub 10%. I think a lot more lineups, especially talking about what the chalk build will be or the optimal build will be somewhere in this vicinity. And I've had all of them sort of land around 520 just based on our early rough draft projections. So any other thoughts on that? And then I want to bring up this one question for you as well.
Yeah, then I also think the upper 6K range is going to be peppered a little bit, where I've got Fowler, Connor, Straka, Cole, Smalley, Norin, and then you can throw Gerard and Colley in there as well, like all pushing somewhere between 10 and 15%. So I think like that's the range that's going to allow people to do whatever they want at the top. And we talk a lot about how like ownership is connected. So I'm higher than you guys on those guys, which also then allows me to be higher on the collection of studs that we just walked through, who, I have at 20 to 25 when you have around 15%, because I'm also expecting people to favor that upper 6K range more, which opens up the salary to do that.
Yeah, and that's the Scotty version, which we'll bring up. So we'll do a Scotty because, whether people go, I mean, one thing that's interesting is, kind of know where that lands, but that's going to force people into that. And I know we're up there on Scotty right now, probably a little bit more. We'll see more than most of us going to say, but just noting it from the first look at all those types of builds and then the thought process around Fleetwood, Xander, Ludwig, Cam Young, Sam Burns, all these guys. We might be high on Scotty right now, even though Scotty's been popular. It's like it kind of pinpoints you to that one range down there. And I just don't know how many people will land heavily on that. But this is getting like just played out in the chat now heavily. The people heard your comments saying Brian Harman, not a good course fit, with all due respect, if he's got basically top, all these top tens. How do you say someone's not a course fit when they have a great course history? So it's good question, but it also might be answered in what you just said. Course history and course fit are not always the same thing.
Well, yeah, but also look at his off the tee progression. If you you can go to Data Golf for this. When you look all the way back to 2012, this is a guy who's been very good off the tee like his entire career. So, he's short off the tee, and yet he's consistently gaining strokes throughout his career off the tee. He's gaining strokes. All of that he's gaining through accuracy. Now you get to 2025 and you get to 2026 and you see a very steep decline in his driving accuracy, in his strokes gained off the tee, I should say, which we then know that's a decline in his driving accuracy. So you get to a course where part of the reason he has done well is because in the past, he has been a good course fit. If the only thing in the past that has been predictive of success here has been driving accuracy, and he's been historically one of the most accurate guys off the tee, then we should expect that his past looks pretty good. Now, driving accuracy is no longer a big advantage that he has over people, and so he's no longer as good of a course fit. That's the biggest reason. That's like the really straightforward reason. But the second part of it is it just became a signature event 2 years ago. I don't really care if Brian Harman beat up on weak fields prior to that with top tens. And now he has to play a lot stronger guys. A lot of those top tens in the past would have been like 30th place or 35th place in the signature event. Why would I care that he's giving me a 30th place finish at $7,800 in a 70-some field event? So, I think both of those kind of contributing factors explain why I don't think he's a good course fit at all. And I think he's going to be overowned this week. And the fact that there are so many people like emotionally responding to that comment tells me that I'm probably right about his ownership getting to 10 to 15% based on his history alone.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think there's just so many other ways. I love the signature event factor. That was a big one that when it first, especially when they first came out, they're like, oh, someone's been so good here. It's like, they played against like Corn Ferry Fields at the time, and now they're playing against the best. And again, he's shown up year after year after year, and I get that. So that's where people are arguing this. So I'm not even against the crowd. I'm just saying I get why they're asking the question, but there's other ways to look at it too. Like Scotty played here, miscut 47th, 13th, and then the last 3 years, 4th, 1st, and 6th. Keegan Bradley, people would have said he missed the cut. He finished 19th. Like, how is he even good at this place? Then he wins. Then he finishes 39th. Then he wins again. It's like there's so many ways that people don't really focus on. Like, how do you describe Denny McCarthy? 7th and 12th in 2 of the last 3 years. Before that, miscut, withdraw, miscut, 73rd, 47th. Which one is he? Oh, he just got better? What's he been doing lately? Well, let me look at Denny McCarthy. 65th, miscut, 48th, 44th, 34th, 60th. So which is like, that's the thing and why people focus too much on that stuff. And it's just in the end, like you said, the emotions get involved. The bias gets involved. We got to play the game and not the picks and the plays. The picks and the plays are a result of the process. So just got to think about that. I'm always on you on this stuff, man. But you say this every week. Like, we get it. But again, it doesn't matter. 12 to 15% on everybody doesn't mean shit. It means 80 to 85% are not touching him. The most overhyped, overplayed thing in the entire PGA DFS universe is ownership in a vacuum. That is where I'll finish. And the in a vacuum is the most important part. I'm not saying ownership's not important. It's extremely important in all of DFS and specifically DFS golf. We talk about it weekly. Alex talks about it weekly at FTN. We rank it in the system with Ship It Nation, how important it is, especially if you're using contest sims and all that. It's the people that sit there and nitpick 13% versus 18, or, oh, you say he's going to be 11. I think he's going to be 14. You're lost. You've already lost the game before it started. So congrats. Thanks for playing. Not you, Stat, specifically. Everyone who does that, though, thanks for coming out. You're creating the edge for everybody else that's playing it at a high level. So that's amazing. It's to Alex's point. That's what people get hung up on. You're making a huge mistake. It's why it originally started. It's not who you play. It's how you play them. There is 6 slots you need to fill out. We're not picking winners. We're not betting golfers. We're not picking top 20s. We're trying to build the best DFS lineup. to win the tournament. So Tambo tangent for you there, but it's just, it's always the same thing. Who cares?
Well, I think to that point, like in regards to Harman, it's not, oh, he's 10 to 15%. That's higher than I like. It's what does his ownership look like relative to the players around him? And how does his distribution of potential outcomes compare to the players around him? When I look at guys around him, I find a number of players that are going to be lower owned that I think have a better distribution of outcomes, a much better chance of winning. Like one of the things here is like his history here obviously is good. And if you got one of the 3rd, 6th, 8th, 5th, 8th, 2nd, 9th, or 8th place finishes from him this week, you would be quite happy. But if Harman's in contention versus if Justin Rose is in contention, you're going to want Justin Rose. Rose has one of the best contention performance scores. Harman has one of the worst. Consequently, Harman has a very low win odds relative to most of the players around him, while Rose has phenomenal odds. So if you're telling me that like I'm going to get Rose and Harman at similar ownership, there's no chance I'm going with Harman instead of Rose. I'll make the similar argument. You can go up a little bit and get some better players. Like I think JJ Spawn is both a better fit, and he's someone that I trust more to turn contention into a great outcome or even a win. So yeah, like that's my point. It's not that, oh, Harman's going to be 10 to 15% and therefore I can't use him. It's Harman's going to be an ownership that is indicative. Like essentially, if he didn't have this course history, he wouldn't be 7,800, or he wouldn't be 7,800 and 10 to 15% owned. He'd be 7,800 and 3% owned, or he'd be, 10 to 15% in the upper 6K range. The quality of play that Harman has played all season puts him more in like the upper 6K range for this week than the upper 7K range. So it's already baked into his price, and he's still going to get ownership because of it.
Yeah, and there's two thoughts going on there to what you said. The one is, for first off, predominantly you are a single entry up to 3 max player, and so that decision is going to become very indicative of how you feel about the rest of what's around it, versus a portfolio player is probably mixing in a ton of these 7K guys. And my point would be on, so that's the first point. So you have to think about it. You just validated that you're like, man, I've got like 3 guys literally next door to him. And on my 1 to 3 max, like I don't even think there'd be a chance that he would make it because of how I feel. On a portfolio of lineups, or something that I'm thinking about when I'm explaining it that way, it's not just because I have a portfolio, but I'm thinking about the entire setup of it all. Will Harman be in my lineups with Siwoo and Bud Cauley and Cantlay and the exact chalk build we just built? No. But if my lineup is already let's just use this, a Scotty with a Corey Connors, Ricky Fowler, and Michael Kim at the bottom, and then I kind of land in that range and Harman ends up into the lineup, I'll know why. And it's not, it's at the end of the day, I've got my 3 decisions down low made for that lineup, instead of trying to pick the Rose or the Minwoo or the Fitzpatrick or Theegalas of the world that it might be. I'm fine if it just lands on the better projection and whatever it is on that spot, just based on my stuff in an optimizer, if it lands on Harman there, because it's fine. Like that's where it landed. The rest of my lineup is built around a different thought process. So that's why I would say it's not who you play, it's how you play them. It's just, it's so many people are hung up on like these little ownership numbers of like, oh, it'll all be this. Well, it'll always be that. There's always going to be ownership of some sort on 85% of the field, and then a very small number, if 0 to 0.1 on everybody else. Like that's what ownership projections are for, and you'll get a good idea of that when you go in. But being hung up on that as like how you're thinking about it is just, it's I think you've already lost when you started, because it's like that's not the entire game, and there's so many other factors going down the board of building out a lineup, whether it is single entry or 150 max, that is going from there. So let's talk about the Scotty version here for a second. I mean, I don't know how much there is to talk about. I guess my take on talking about Scotty is let's try and get to the real number, because first of all, it's how popular do you think he'll actually be based on what we have? We already know what it is. When you build Scotty, okay, insert all the 7K guys that fit and where do you land and all of that. That's not really my thought process here for this conversation this week, because it's a little bit different, but it's more of where do you actually think it lands, because we know the consequence of, or, for lack thereof, or better term, of the combinatorial ownership of like, if Scotty does bloat to a bigger number, that means the low 6Ks and the low 7s got much more than we thought. That means your Patrick Cantlays, your Sam Burnses, your Ludwigs, maybe not as popular as we thought. Again, double digits? Yes. The numbers change a lot here, though, right? If it's going to be Scotty, the week Scotty was 27, and then Alex Smalley ends up being like 19 beside him when we did not have either of those being that high. Well, they were correlated and they went together. And so both got bloated up to a bigger number. So, or steamed, as people like to use. So just your thoughts on where Scotty actually ends up and why.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned you guys had him at like 26%, and you said that you think you might be high. I think I'm more likely to bring him up towards like 30 to 35% than I am to bring him down from where we currently have him at 22%. But I think he could very easily get to like 30 because it is so easy to build lineups with him. You click Scotty and you go Wrighton, Poston, Gerard. 3 guys who have been in good form. 3 guys who should fit the golf course pretty well. 3 guys who we know are going to get some ownership regardless. You're still left with 7,250. Like, this is a very, very easy lineup to build. From 7,250, you can do what you want. You can go to, a Corey Connors or a Ricky Fowler who's 67. Like, you can go Connors and now the course history darling Brian Harmon. That's a very solid lineup. That's a lineup where every single person who builds something like that is going to feel good about all 6 slots of their lineup, which has been very rare for Scotty lineups this year. And it's why Scotty lineups have been held in check so much. But now Scotty just showed that charge on Saturday was the first time we saw the Scotty of last year, this year, since his, debut win. So I think we kind of have a perfect storm here. Scotty just showed signs of real life. This is the easiest it's been to build really good lineups with him. I'm thinking 30% for Scotty lineups.
Yeah, I guess after all the conversation, that's why I wanted to have it this way. I kind of feel like our number might just be right then. I think it's like, 25 to 30, and that would make sense to your point there. I guess more people will be comfortable based on the event and the cut and all that stuff versus no cut. I mean, like, so it's like you're setting it up where like they can play and you've got, more comfortability when we have that of people saying, okay, they're going to play, they're going to score. I can play these guys. And I'm sure more versions of this will form. But it's like you said, we did it with the Darling there. You could have it with Fowler instead of Connors. You could have it with, Fox, or you could have it with going up to Smalley and then bringing Gerard down to, Norin or Rio or something like that. So or Eric Cole, that type of thing. So I do think there's more ways that this gets built, or maybe it's not posted. Maybe it's like a Smalley, keep Harmon in there. And then, somebody mentioned like Decky, Knapp, Lowry, whatever it ends up being, even Akshay. There's a lot of versions that this can hit. It is interesting that they're not projecting as well. So when we get to the optimizer world of people putting them out there, and again, not sure exactly what it will finalize like. This is, as I always say on here, why we bring it up in advance for everyone, is our rough draft and just using our lineup builder, the hand builder, to go through it. These are not near, like the optimal is over 525 or something. So it's like 10 points shy. Not the end. That means nothing in like the median score, end of the world when it comes to what you actually play. I'm saying, but what people land on, that will dictate sometimes keeping the ownership a little bit more in check if these full lineups aren't playing out that way. But there's tons of variations that still scored 518 or 519, that type of thing. So I do think we got the number probably right on Scotty. When you talk about leveraging the builds that we just talked about, let's move on. What are some of the ways you're thinking that we can leverage the chalk build this week?
Well, within Scotty lineups, I think you made an awesome point already that so here's something I just played around with my ownership. Like, if we get Scotty up from 22% to 32%, what has to happen in order for this to make sense from a salary owned perspective? Well, that upper 6K range, low 7K range, guys have to go way up. So like, instead of, the Fowler, Connor, Straka, Gerard, Wrighton, kind of group being maybe 10% or a little bit over 10%, they're a little bit short of 15% or approaching 20%, something like that. Like that gets it done. So you're just talking about a 5 percentage point increase for a handful of players in that upper 6K range can be an extra 10 percentage points for Scotty. That's very doable. And the reason this is such an important point to make is because it means if you're building Scotty lineups, that's the thing you need to be aware of. If you go Scotty, Wrighton, Gerard, Smalley, Straka, Connors, and like that's your lineup or whatever, or something along those lines, you're running the risk of having crazy, crazy high conditional ownerships within Scotty lineups on those guys. So I think my preferred route would be to build something like what Pat and I looked at, where you take a chance on a really cheap guy or even two really cheap guys, then avoid that upper 6, low 7K range, and then go find your favorite, like, mid 7K players, or maybe you even get into the upper 8s once or the low 9s and go really cheap with some other spots. So really just trying to avoid, like, I think the best way to put it is when someone clicks Scotty, they're left with 72.40 or something like that. Most people then with their last 5 picks are going to hug that price tag as much as possible so that they can keep their worst player as good as possible. And I think what we can do is we can say, you know what, this is a no-cut event. I can take on a little bit more risk. I can find someone who can really score well, even if they only finish 20th place. And now I get access to another, like a second really good player somewhere in the lineup, and avoid the potential conditional ownership issues that will come up if Scotty ends up higher owned than what I'm expecting. And it just makes you a little bit immune to that. Whereas if you build like the chalk build and Scotty ends up being 15% or 20%, you're in good shape, but you run the risk of ending up with a really bad lineup if he ends up 30 to 35%.
Yeah, I was just pulling this version up to try and see, like, again, this leaves $100. So it's basically, in my opinion, at least, of like a setup that you could see. Gerard could be Collie, Siwoo could be Cantlay, depending on how people feel about last week. This is just a hand-built version of the Scotty to get to like the 520 range.
Yep.
In the projection. And like Novak is another guy that we'll see at the bottom, what he actually changes. Again, I think the more that people say like, oh, I could get some scoring out of them, or I could make this, whether it's Benjamin James down there at 6,400, or people just saw him have a good US Open after all the ownership the week before they had him, and people want to stick with him. He fits this build instead of Novak, and you can just leave it as is. But this does feel like this makes me feel better about the 26 to 30 that we talked about, because this will be fine. I think what was asked earlier by Tim, I brought it up for a couple seconds, but if you just roll, it's like you got to be comfortable with the 4th guy in there, because this one, it's kind of like funny how this works. But you look at this lineup, and I'll leave Tim's thing up actually. So you look at this and you're like, okay, I'm going to take out Siwoo and go back to, anyway, I'll go back to what I had. I basically said what you said at first. You said like if you went with like a Smalley, Connors, Fowler, give an example here. You don't even get, I mean, you still only have 8K. So even if you went with like Brian Harmon, the darling, like you said, if that's what people want to do, you don't really get to where you want to go, right? You got to go. And then you say, okay, well, I want Siwoo in that. Now it works, right? That's where that version comes from, but you're right back to the lower 7s with Wright. That's one of the versions I just had up. It's funny though. It's like the opposite of, I was talking about Best Buy pricing. You don't feel, well, I'm not using 4 6K guys. I'm using 3. And they're all at like the upper end. So I feel pretty good about it. And it's like, I still get Siwoo, but it's like this guy could just as easily, like Wrighton actually could be a lot more, because he's been like popping off the page on Sims and things like that. But I'm just saying, like, just noting it, whoever your guy was here could be 6,900 and Siwoo could be 91, and you'd get the same lineup. But it's funny, psychologically, people wouldn't feel as good about that, because like, man, 4 6K guys, but it's really no difference, right? When you're looking at it here. So I do think Wrighton will be popular. I don't know what the final version of these guys will be. That will be what's interesting to see, whether it is like let's go to Novak now in this one. This is the example I brought up earlier, and maybe it's Gerard over Collie, because Collie's, last week missed cut, but he did win recently. I'm just noting it, either of those two. This is another one. That's what I just had up. See how this feels so much different to people, like, oh, but I'm only using 2 6K guys, even though you've got a 72 and a 7K flat right there. So I actually do think people will get pretty comfortable with this build now that I thought about it.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's going to be a popular build. I think the only way to really deviate is there's a very clear tier break in the 6s, where like that Fowler, Connors, Straka, Smalley, and then let's throw Gerard in there as well. Those guys are head and shoulders above basically everyone 66 and down. Maybe you could throw Fox into that group as well. But now that we're not on hard, windy golf courses, I think Fox gets a bit of a bump down. So I think optimizers especially are not going to go down to like 63, 64, 62, 61 very often. I think that's probably my favorite. It's either my favorite or my second favorite way of doing this, where my favorite might be like you don't go into the sixes at all and you stay in the sevens, because there are a bunch of guys there right around that like price tag where it's Bridgman, Højgaard, Matsuyama, Lowry. You can even take a chance on Knapp. Coming off injury, he's going to be really low owned, where those guys aren't going to be owned. You're not going to run into any conditional ownership issue there. But I think maybe the easier way to do it, especially if you want access to a second really, really, really good player, I think it's, instead of living in that upper 6K range, you take 2 shots instead of 3 or 4 in the really low 6K range.
Agreed. Also, I will say this too, all for under 70, a very big thing. And that could be massive on Sunday when, everyone's got their lineups and they're all happy with them. But it's like at the end of the day in the Scotty lineup, one of the 6K guys had, 2 of them aren't going to get the all for under 70 because of one bad round or something across the board, versus the double stud build without Scotty, or like the more balanced build ends up having it where all the guys just crush, have some extra crazy spike rounds in there, and then end up having a really good position placement as well and mixed in. And maybe the winner still comes from that group and Scotty's second or something. And then now that lineup really could flip the board quite a bit. Before I go into the next thing, I just want to remind everyone of the big guy event. Our guy that we lost last year, DGen75, we did plan the big guy event with his GoFundMe, and then Ship It Nation backed it up a little bit further. But this event is for everyone. So if you didn't hear or you weren't paying attention to the newsletters or last week or anything, we do have the event in Las Vegas this year, Friday, August 21st. It'll be 7:30 to 10:30 p.m. All the details are over at shipitnation.com/ it's the big guy event, but the link should be down below, and you can ask me or go on X. I've posted it there. Hit me up directly, a DM, email, whatever, if you need it. Everybody is invited. There's a few different ways you can get in. There's a Big Guy Burgundy collectible where you get the hat that he's wearing in the Big Guy Burgundy avatar. Plus that, all the money goes towards future Big Guy events beyond, for this one that we've already put up, DGen 75. So it's $75 for a seat, $75 for a collectible if you can't go and you want to build towards the future. And then we went with the one of one theme. 101 gets you both. So you're going to get a hat, a shirt, the drink tickets, the appetizers, the games, the watch party, everything else that comes with it. It will be in Las Vegas, the 12th floor at the D Las Vegas Casino and Hotel. So wanted to bring that up before we keep rolling here, because I saw this, and this is a big guyism for sure, right? It was actually pick your own slapdicks was how he worded it, but pick your own losers is true. And while we agreed very heavily on this, I also would say, like in other conversations, and even James was pretty open about this, is I think a lot of people also think this is only slapdicks was for mainly like the lower end range of like the 6K range, because obviously that's where it's a little bit different. Someone getting to 12, 15% in the 6K range is nuts when there's 20, 30 guys around them. So you won't see me go there too often. But I think it's also like when you say pick your own losers, to think about leverage, it's like, who are the guys up top? Like, would Matt Fitzpatrick be that bad? No, but it's just he's being considered bad, because why are you going to him at 10K flat when you can go to Xander, Fleetwood, Ludwig, Sam Burns, all these other guys there? So like if you started out with a Fitzpatrick JT, or let's use something like this, take out Fitzpatrick for a second, and Morikawa Henley, and then deciding, do you want to come up over the top and still land in that similar range that everybody else is landing on? Like Stat said earlier, these guys will have double-digit ownership, most likely, but is it 10.2%, 11.2 like it shows? Or is it, could it drop to 9? Again, it's not about that number, really. It's just how different is this, Alex, of a way to build? Every lineup sort of landed in that $7,300 range, but did it land there with Fitzpatrick, Morikawa, and Henley? Not that I thought of, or not that I saw.
Yeah, or like you could start Fitzpatrick and Cam Young, and like that's the kind of start where, like, let's say it works out really well. Everyone is going to look back on it and say, oh my God, all I had to do was play the 2 guys who have had the best seasons all year. And I could do that at low ownership and have a really unique combination at the top. So if you really want to play like Brian Harman and Rayton and a lot of these other really chalky guys, I think that's one way to do it, right? Is you just, okay, if you're going to eat that kind of chalk, now just go and play them with a really contrarian start. And that's still a very solid build. So if, not that Harmon's like super, super chalky and standing out amongst his peers in ownership, but I think he he and other chalk, like if you want to embrace Siwoo, for example, or you want multiple pieces of that upper 6K range, this is I think a very smart way to do that.
Yeah, I will say this is as we said, we both I think botched it on this one, but what the saying is to put a bow on it. And to put a bow on this, and I'm glad you brought up the Harmon one. This is a prime example. This is what tilts people the most. They blame Brian Harmon chalk, and again, he may not even be super popular. Just to note the example, though, they say, of course, this chalk donkey, loser chalk, idiot got there, scoring like crazy. Bud Cauley a couple weeks ago, might have been Fitzpatrick at 8,900 last week. Like, what an absolute loser play that got there. It's like, yeah, but do you know, like, less than 1% of the lineups of the entire field, of all the best players in the world, the casuals, you name it, everything, like 1% of the lineups have Harmon with Cam Young and Fitzpatrick as a trio like that. So you just played him bad. It wasn't who you play. It was how you played him and how it ended up playing out. And this is the prime example of where it's like you said, once you go this start, it's up to you what you do. It doesn't mean that you have to play Brian Harmon either. We're just saying if you were going to play Brian Harmon, this would be a way where you could separate it. And when everyone else is tilting him for being the worst play of all time at that ownership, it's like, this is the way where you can set it up and say, well, yeah, but I didn't play him like you and 99% of the field did. I played him my way. And so it's not just, the saying like play your own slapdick. It's also like play them in your own way is another added on piece that could be fine.
And now, man, I hope Harmon plays poorly this week because
no, of course not. But like I said, also too, when you're considering it, and for me, for example, for my main lineup, I'm probably not considering it either. But it's like when I'm looking at it from a perspective of how he gets into my lineups, I know how he does. I know exactly how he does. It's all baked in and built into it. And then you run out the sims on top of that and you sort of look at what the field's doing. And I may end up with an underweight stance on him because he's not popping off the board there. And if the field is going to if he is going to be overowned for that position, that's fine. He might end up in 10% of my lineups versus the field's on 15%. And I'm 5 under. But then my 10% of the lineups are all built in a way where it's like, okay, I hopefully have Harmon where when the rest of the people that have him are tilting because they got something else wrong with it, maybe some of my lineups have him in a good way. That's really what I'm hoping for. And then I always give stat shit, so I got to give him credit too. This is a funny one. But even if 15% smashes at donkey chalk, still means 85% didn't have him. And that's true. And I know you're running along with the joke, and that's why I love always chatting with you because you're open to fun feedback and engagement and having, back and forth. And like you said, there's way more ways to do this. It's not like my way. I just give my opinions and my thoughts on it. But just noting it, it's like, it's not even just the 15% that have them and the 85 that don't. It's what we just showed with Fitzpatrick, Young, and Harmon. That is like a 1% or less trio to start out a lineup where if you end up needing those three, and someone's like, damn, of course that loser Harmon got there. It's like nobody played him with those guys. So it's like looking at it from that perspective is always the key. It's about your total build overall. Stat did have a good one too. Here, want a contrarian construction? Don't play any 7K guys.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think
what do you
I think we'll see plenty of lineups that have like 3 guys in the 6K range and don't need anyone in the 7s.
It feels like, I mean, it's hard though, because when you saw every chalk build we did, there was 3 7K guys in almost all of them, or at least 2. So I guess, what is the point though? Let's just say it's, who do we say a bunch?
I think that's true of Scotty lineups, but I think outside of Scotty, like if you start, let's say Xander, Burns, and Siwoo, you can very easily do like Connors, Smalley, and then that would give you something in the 8s, I think. So let me find that.
I got it here. What do you say? Smalley and who? Connors?
Yeah, Smalley, Connors, and then you're left with 8.2. So whether it's Griffin, McIntyre, Rye, English, you're not using anyone in the 7s there. It could also be like instead of Xander, it could be a more balanced lineup where you're going, let's say JT as your first guy in. And now you have, it wouldn't even be JT as your first guy in because you'd have now 9,200 for your last spot. So like it could be, Burns, JT, Morikawa, and Kim, and now 2 6K guys. So I think there are plenty of ways that you can actually do this. Maybe it would be like Oberg is the first man in, and now you're left with Goddard, Hovland, or Keegan as the last guy in. So there are lots of lineups, particularly non-Scotty lineups, that very naturally avoid the 7K range, not because they're purposely avoiding the 7s, but just because The upper 6K guys are really, really underpriced. And then if you start that and you're not, if you start that way and you're not paying all the way up for Scotty, like you can just get 4 really solid players in your remaining 4 spots where you don't even have to come close to that 7K range.
Yeah, I also think too, this is another prime example where it's like people make good point. Like I like this point for sure. And I like what I actually agree here with Stat. We said, of course you can do it. I just don't think it'll be common. Probably not. Like I said, I think there's just so many lineups that haven't even, I'm going to do it again here, but this would just be another prime position where people will say like, oh, better spin the wheel and hope that it's one of the good Bobby Mack weeks, or like, let me see if Ben Griffin can return to that, way he was last year and whatever it might be, just to avoid that range. This is a prime position to plug in a Harman, where it's like you have 8,200 left and you're like, all right, how do I play Harman in a different way? Play him in a 7K lineup that also fits an 8K guy. Well, almost an example, it's totally different, but of like NFL Showdown where you need 6 guys. It's like, okay, I got Jamar Chase money, but I'm just going to play T. Higgins. It's everyone's playing Jamar Chase, or the majority, and the benefit in golf, and it's the same in that 6 spots to fill, different captains, etc. But you don't know what's going on in the rest of the build, and then you're landing that little added bonus at the end.
Can you bring that last stat comment up? I love that you just went to NFL Showdown, because that's exactly where I was going to take this response as well. The reason why this whole thing matters, and why whether or not the construction is going to be contrarian or common, why it matters is conditional ownership. And so we can think of like NFL Showdown when, let's say you have 4 Rams in and 1 Seahawk. The vast majority of people in a competitive game like that are then going to want that last spot in their lineup to be a Seahawk no matter what, because they would rather have a 4-2 than a 5-1 Rams. So you're getting conditional ownership advantage on that last spot if you go to a Ram than you would if you go to a Seahawk. Similarly, in a lot of PGA lineups, people will choose like their last 2v2 in a very specific way that puts them on a specific build because they feel like they have to get access to a certain price range or something like that, or there's a group of players that they need to get access to. And so you get a conditional ownership advantage by going to a different roster construction. The reason why, when I say like, I don't think it's going to be uncommon to have a lineup that avoids the 7K range, essentially what I'm saying is I don't think you're gaining any conditional ownership advantage anywhere in the lineup by avoiding the 7K range, because there are so many lineups where people aren't presented with a decision that they're going to be like naturally drawn to that 7K range. Does that make sense, Tambo?
Yes, it matters too, I think, on a Scotty slate, because it's like, again, it almost goes back to, it almost ties together with when you've talked in the past about like the 4v, like, you've got 3v3 or 4v4, the same. It's like, that's already the same. It's like you're getting 2 spots. And even if you are picking your own guys down low, I still agree that this week, I don't see very many lineups landing without a 7K guy, because it's just so easy. And even like I said, in certain variations, like I showed, that you could still get there. But I see exactly what your point is and what you're saying. And this, again, like just another, even when you go outside of the Scotty world for this, it's like you kind of end up on the same. I know, like everyone's like, well, you're just clicking the most obvious. Okay, like I'm just going to show you here, like Harry Hall and Michael Kim. Okay, fine. Like you're not on the same thing across the board, but like, let's just say that now makes you up top go to something along the lines of, what ends up being popular here. Will this be a popular build or duped? No, but for a lineup that avoids the 7s, it's got the 2 most popular 8Ks, and it's very likely that you'll get to a popular 10K, whether it's a Fleetwood or a Xander or whatever it might be. And then a couple things are different, but that's like force feeding it with the low owned. If you're doing this in an optimizer too, by the way, it's not going to feed you Hall or Kim very often, because for the exact same money, you can go down and just get, let's just use Keegan, who I think will be more popular. And now it's going to want to have like Smalley, and we'll use Ricky, right? 522, by the way. So when you talk about what an optimizer is going to plug in and what we talked about this whole show, like, oh, no 7K guys. But again, everyone's build will be different in this, but just showing you what's going to typically happen where you're like, man, I didn't hit the sevens. I didn't hit the guys above Fleetwood. No, Scotty. It's like the inverse of this, by the way, is the exact same thing. It's, Scotty with no sevens. Okay. Scotty, Siwoo. I'm going to go to, who's the other pop? We said like,
as you build this, I think like this is going to make my point pretty well. I think another way to think about this is like, what are the chances that someone goes through a lineup and just chooses who they think are the best plays and lands in a lineup that doesn't have anyone in the 7Ks? That's going to be really uncommon with Scotty lineups, because in order to do that, you're going to have to, do something funky like this. You're probably going to have to land on a 6K player that is not in that range of guys that we said is like a tier above the other 6K guys. So that's going to make it harder. But outside of Scotty lineups, it's going to be fairly common. It's very easy. It's very natural for someone to land on a lineup that doesn't have anyone in the sevens, just because there are so many good plays elsewhere that kind of create just a strong lineup as a whole.
And this was it. Like, you do something like this and then it's like, okay, it's Cantlay or it's him. I mean, like, I think this is where people also look at it and go, well, no one's going to play this version of it because you have to spend you don't have to spend all the money. That's what I'm saying. So that's why I said earlier, like from a technical standpoint, I see it, but like, if you look at it this way, I do think someone's going to cancel out a guy here. Maybe it's whoever and say, yeah, I'm just going to play Wrighton, but so 3-6 games. So the Scotty lineups just end up like this. And if someone's willing to play Straka over Wrighton just to say they don't have a 7K guy or whatever, fine. But I do think most of the Scotty lineups are going to have two of Smalley, Wrighton, Gerard, those guys. But if it was only in the upper sixes, we know by projection who it's likely going to be. You'd have to hand build it out separately. But then I feel like you're going to get too much of the needle in the haystack approach I talk about all the time, or the diamond in the rough, as I usually call it, where it's like, well, if I'm doing that and I'm going to be different, I think Michael Kim, I don't think enough people are talking about Eric Cole. Finau could be his week. Tambo sometimes likes Sung Jae. Well, now I'm forced into Scotty because I have 11-8 and nobody else is even near that. And it lands on this. Oh, wow. Ludwig. And that's your build. And it's like, first of all, it's like way off, which it's a medium projection. I get that. But it's also like you've kind of just handpicked the four guys. And it's like a 6-game parlay that you've forced, where you're picking underdogs on purpose and all of this stuff when you could just build a better lineup overall and not force yourself into this just to say you did it. And most of those other builds that you would land on then end up being the popular versions Alex talked about. That's where I see where you're coming from fully. Anything else you want to add on this stuff for the week? If not, let's talk about the betting breakdown.
Yeah, it's funny. We thought we were going to have one of our quicker shows of the year. It's quickly become one of the longest shows of the year, but
it's fine. People are sticking around. People are watching. I always say that. It's like, I really don't have anything else better to do. I'm sure there's lots I can be working on like yourself, but this is the point of these shows and why you and I have so much fun doing it, is because it's way more like, I say this all the time too. I'll say it again here because it's a random week, but like we do the early shows. And like I always talk about this, like you can capitalize on the clicks by getting your shows out early. And I understand that too. We do it as much as possible. Other people do it, all of that. Like I get it. And we understand why that is. We do it too. But also you can help people capitalize on making the most money. And that's what we like to do and teach and learn. And you and I both riffing back and forth, trying to figure that stuff out. That's our number one goal for both of us with your Discord, with Mastermind, DFS Mastermind, Ship It Nation. All the stuff that we do is about helping others. There's nobody that can help you capitalize on a Thursday show for a Wednesday night, Thursday morning event, like lock for yourself, whether it's you got to go to bed Wednesday night, wake up and just sweat WDs, or whether you should be waiting right until Thursday morning. But my point is, it's like this show gets great views for when we put it out, but we could put it out 3 days early. It'd be useless. Like most of the stuff we're talking about is very specific to helping you make money this specific slate, this week, these builds, all of that. And that's what I love, take pride in. I know you're the same. And that's why we have so much fun doing it. And that's why the chat's more involved and all that type of thing. It's just really good from that perspective. So hopefully, people understand that. If you do like this show, continue to give it a thumbs up, continue to follow the channel, ask for more, leave comments, give us feedback. But yeah, we love talking about golf. We love talking about DFS, and we love helping other people make money. That's really what it comes down to.
For the betting breakdown, I only have one outright so far this week. And it's funny because it perfectly kind of encapsulates the discussion we had earlier about like sticking with your guys. It is Justin Rose. Let me remind myself what number I got on him. Using the 1/5 each way, 4-3 spots. I think it was 75.
I think it was 75 to 1.
Yeah, 75 to 1 there. And it's funny because I caught myself like thinking, do I really want to make this bet again? And then I realized, wait a minute, I'm way up this year on Justin Rose outright bets because I got one. So why in the world would I ever not go back to it? He continues to play well. He continues to be one of the most volatile players on tour. His ball striking has now been awesome in 3 of the last 4 weeks. So we're getting the approach spikes that we need from him in order to be able to win a golf tournament on a consistent basis. He just hasn't had the level of spike putting week that we know he's going to have in the future, that he's super capable of having, that he's had a bunch over the last year, including both of his wins. He's driving the ball a lot better than he has in the past. He's now gained considerably in 3 consecutive events off the tee. Like, he's the ultimate outright bet this week, and he continues to be the most volatile player on tour by our event-to-event standard deviation number. So Rose, I think, is just an awesome bet this week. Very easy click to go back to, and I can't even believe that I ever questioned it just because he hasn't won in the last few times that I bet him, because I already have the outright victory with him this year. And of course, we shouldn't expect him to win all the time. You know, he's got a 3.1% chance of winning in our model this week, which is crazy high for this number. It's probably the highest around the industry, but he's backed that up over the last year and more. So also to that point, like, one of the reasons why we are so much higher than most on his outright odds is because he has the second best contention performance score in this field, and that's going to help him get it done if he's in contention.
Yeah, I like that. Maybe we got to stick with Hideki too on the bet. What was he, 110 or 150 or something last time? So maybe we just go back to
let me see what he's at. I do think that Hideki's not so great of a course fit. Okay, he's 70 in the base market, so yeah, he might be over 100 again. What win odds do we give him? 73, 1.9%. So yeah, he's definitely popping as a very good outright. Let's see, what is he in that specific market? Show more. Whoops. Oh my God.
Keep scrolling. Let's get a big one. What's the number?
It's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be huge. I think it's going to be like 120-ish would be my guess. Let's see. Maybe not even that much.
Over here, 120 is not huge to Alex. He's,
110. So yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much the same that we got him at last week. And if we were betting him last week in the US Open, we should definitely be betting him in a much smaller field. So yeah, I think I will probably add Hideki at 110.
Yeah, let's go. Love it. My man Gary is in the Fantasy Golf World Championship this week. Fellow competitor, but also friend, hung out with him at different events. King of the Beach in the past. He's a Ship It Nation member. Says, I know this is the Leverage Lane show, but any thoughts on strategy for the cash game this week? So you know what it is. Like, this is they did change it this year, by the way. It's 200 people. It used to be more, and it used to be 300 down to 150, then 150 down to 40 or 50, depending on the year. This year they went to 200, and it's double cash game. It's this week. It's 200 down to 100. Those that make it and move on next week will be 100 down to 50, and then 50 go live at 3M and play there. So you're a member, Gary, but for anybody who doesn't know, when you do sign up for Ship It Nation, you go to More Education and PGA, you can access the course that we put out there. And there's actually a whole section that will be applicable in there where I cover the Fantasy Golf World Championship 3-round playdown that you can get that. Every member gets this for free. When you're on the site, you just go under More Education. We've got courses across all of them. It's I think 2 hours or so across the board, but you can also just highlight right to this part and focus on it. And then if you're lucky enough to make it all the way through, you can talk about how to attack the live final. So just check it out if you guys want to there. Anything else, Alex? Anything for one and done you want to talk about? Obviously, this part of the season is a bit tricky because kind of everyone's in their own lane when it comes to where they're going with it. But what do we got for one and done this week?
What do we have for one and done this week? Let's see. We have Oberg, Burns, Siwoo, Cantlay, Clark, JT, Kitayama, Spawn, Hovland, Minwoo. Then we're getting into kind of a lower range. Anyone kind of stand out to you? I don't think I have very strong opinions on this week.
Is there any benefit to using Fleetwood now versus I don't think anyone who's using Fleetwood this week?
We don't have him.
Oh, I thought you mentioned him. I heard Oberg,
Nope.
and I thought you said Fleetwood at the same time.
Nope.
Who do you have as your top three?
I think a lot of the guys that we have saved aren't actually playing this week, so I kind of lean. Let's just continue to ride the hot hand either with Burns or Wyndham, and just hope that they continue their form.
Yeah, I think is the Burns bounce back a thing? I mean, I know it was whatever. He's not going to get a chance. He was out there on the range for a minute and warming up to go into the playoff, hoping for that. But Clark just closed it down the stretch. Is there any thought or strategy around I like sticking with winners like Clark and how hot he's been, but it's are we looking to just collect money here? Is he winning again the amount that he just got last week versus this week versus the other week? Any thoughts on that before we finalize?
I think my thought process here is more along the lines that I think both have kind of been punching above their weight of late. And so I would like to take them now while they're still playing at this level before, they fall off a little bit down the stretch.
Yeah, I would lean Burns, I think, personally.
That's good with me for sure.
All right, we'll go with Burns. Do you have your lane lined up for the week? We'll get to our leverage lane, and then you can let the people also know where they can find you. We'll tie it into the end here.
Yeah, I want to start by saying very much appreciate the people who kind of have followed along all show, and even who kind of challenged me on Harman earlier. I think that leads to some really great discussion. I'm definitely someone who likes being challenged in that way. So by all means, every single week, if you disagree with something I say, by all means, point it out. And I think it also helps that, you then hear more kind of rationale about why that is. So really appreciated that discussion. I wanted to mention that before jumping into the leverage lane. My leverage lane is actually probably a little bit surprising given a lot of the conversation on the show today, but I think the mid 7K range is vastly being overlooked. And there are a lot of really under-owned guys in this range. Hideki for sure, Akshay, Adam Scott, Keith Mitchell, Woodland, even going back to Spieth. I think part of this is that this is a no-cut event on what should be pretty, birdie-heavy golf course this week. And these guys are really good at scoring. Both Mitchell and Akshay Bhatia specifically are near the very top in my birdie rate over expectation data, which is available in my Discord. Nikolai Højgaard is there as well. And these guys just aren't getting a ton of love. Wrighton is basically the only guy in this range. Poston as well, actually, who looks like he's going to get pretty considerable ownership. And interestingly, we mentioned the fact that there's kind of this group in the upper 7Ks, low 8Ks, and then this big group in the upper 6Ks and low 7Ks, like Gerard at 7 flat, Cauley at 7 flat. So there is going to be plenty of love for the 7K range overall, but I think this mid 7K range, like I said, it is really actually going to be overlooked and is going to be less owned than what it seems like a lot of the chat here today kind of expects. And I really like a lot of these players in this range, and a lot of them do fit the mold of guys that I've been on a lot this year. And some of them I even went away from, like Akshay. I didn't use Keith last week. I didn't use Thigala last week. And maybe this is a good opportunity to get right back to my guys who have now kind of turned things around a little bit as well.
Very similar this week. I mean, I'm not going to be using, first off, I'm not going to be using 6K guys in my main. And again, I know not everybody is, but just looking at it, that's part one that I can just tell you right away, which likely leads to a second thought. We'll see where Scotty ends up, but probably not. But just noting it, what I like here is I like the lower 8s and the upper 7s. And you're seeing guys like Hovland, Kitayama, Rye, Spawn, Rose. You talked about Thigala, Spieth, we mentioned earlier. That just looks completely overlooked to me. I'm not saying I'll just jam them all into a balance build, but I do think that that's enough leverage, especially in the $200 single entry with 550K up top, where it's like I could land on 4 of those guys or 3 of them, still get to somebody up top, and then just make my way down low where I could even end up below. Like if I landed on your guy Hideki or something like that. So I won't be getting into the 6K range. I won't be using Scotty in that build. And I will definitely be leaning more on like the Hovland down to Thigala range and then pinpointing above and below, because that almost puts me into different builds automatically or pushes me to the balance versus having the 2 guys above that a lot of people will be on or the 2 guys below that a lot of people will be on. So don't want to name all the names, but I mean, that's the majority of where I'm going to land for my leverage lane. I'm going to focus on 8,500 to 7,700 to build out that more balanced build.
I like
it. Man. What do you got going on this week? Let the people know where they can find you. Fun show. Obviously, a lot of stuff with the new golf changes, the U.S. Open, all of that. Appreciate everybody that stuck around and watched live. We do put the timestamps in, as people know by now, or if you're getting there, you make it this far on a playback and you don't know for future. Like, man, I wish I had just known that. Look below. We always have the timestamps set for you so you can go through it all. But where can people find you this week, Alex?
At Alex Blickle 1 on Twitter. Find all my stuff through there, as always.
It's not in the chat, but if you go to at Alex Blickle 1 on Twitter, the link will be there. And then there's additional steps to get in there, but make sure you use code leverage when you're joining. That's the key.
I actually gave them a note that like, it seems like people now have to make a click once you go to my profile over on Tails to actually find the packages. But just hit the either like VIP access or VIP, and then that'll link you to all the subscription options, which will then let you see all of the channels in the Discord.
Perfect. And Scooter, late tail. He found only as good as 80 on Decky, but in on Decky. Numbers already dropping. Alex is moving the needle when it comes to that. If you guys want to check out Ship It Nation and everything we've got going on, you can go to shipitnation.com. The promo is at the top. It is cheaper to get your first month all access, including everything we offer across the board, all the new Slate stations and everything, even in beta right now with the Stone 2.0, the updated Slate station, all of the showdown content with the spike report and all of that for across all slates. You see the logos. We've got the Winner Circle program that enters you in it as a SaberSim member. So it's less right now at $49 than it is to get the PGA only. So go check it out, shipitnation.com. No code needed. Just click that big banner right at the top. That's going to do it for this one, guys. For Alex and for myself, ToeTagginTambo, good luck in your contest this week, and let's ship it.